Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. We're going to talk about shuttle payloads today with beside me is Tracy Gill. Hey, Tracy.
How are you?
Great. Good to see you. And Mikey Haddad.
How you doing, Mark?
Mikey's wrote a book on payloads. We'll see the cover of that. It's about they're level 4 technicians in the they were first in the orbit and checkout building and then in the SSPF, Space Station Processing Facility. And we're going to talk about those little canisters that Italians made to put in the cargo bay to do all kinds of science and take things up there. We're going to be talking about Raphael, Leonardo, and Columbus. And they have nothing to do with Ninja Turtles, right, guys? Good to see you guys. How y'all doing?
Great, Mark.
Good. Tracy, what you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you're doing now.
So I'm from Florida. I was born in Sarasota and grew up in Port Charlotte. Been with NASA since 1990. So and I was one of those kids who grew up. So I remember seeing an Apollo landing. Got to see the shuttle launches, and I just wanted to work for NASA. So getting to live out my dream here. And now these days I'm working on human landing systems and getting back to my roots of NASA, where I was interested in trying to help us get back to the moon.
So you're working on Artemis 5 and 6,
I'm
right?
working on Artemis 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
So human landing systems missions.
Right.
So we have SpaceX designated for Artemis 3 and 4 with a Starship, and Blue Origin with their Blue Moon lander on Artemis 5.
Right. A lot of people don't know that Blue Origin actually has a in the queue missions to the moon 4 and 5 and maybe beyond that, right?
Artemis 3, 4, and 5 are the ones awarded right now.
Okay. All right. And it's a fluid situation. You better believe it there. And Mikey, give us your thumbnail where you grew up and how you got involved in this space business.
Sure. I was born in Cleveland, moved to Florida. I was just 9 years old and used to watch all the Apollo missions from across the river there in Titusville. And I said, I'm going to work there one day. And was lucky enough to get picked by NASA and worked out there for 32 years. Loved every minute of it. Worked with this guy for a number of years, and worked space station, which we'll talk today, and then worked some of the planetary missions. And there's a lot of things that flew on the shuttle. So awesome career. Yep.
So I was out on Cocoa Beach the other night, which I love to go out to Cape Canaveral Beach, actually Buchanan area, okay. And space station come over. I mean, just big and bright as could be, going west to east, and I get a thrill seeing it, but I can't imagine the thrill that you all get knowing that your hardware's up there. You did things. Well, what's it feel like? You watch it very often go overhead, Tracy?
I do. I get the text messages when it's going to come over. If you go to spotthestation.nasa.gov and you enter where you live, you can ask for it to send you an email or a text message. And when it goes overhead, and it's convenient, I don't do it every time, but I'll go out there and watch it, and people go, "What are you looking at?" And, "Oh, that's the space station." Makes you feel pretty proud to be a part of that.
Well, it should. 22 years continuously occupied. 23 in November. We're just around the corner from that, which is incredible. We're going to talk about one of the astronauts that lived on there here at the end of the program. But Mikey, you get a sense of pride when you see it go overhead?
Absolutely, yeah. Like same thing like Tracy. I get the text message, so it lets you know ahead of time, about a day or so ahead of time, and just going out and looking at it and saying, yeah, the piece of making that happen. And especially if you got the audio on and you hear a crew talking, and somebody going over your head, 200 miles over your head, and there's people in that thing, and I had a little part of making them people, up there doing their thing. It's pride every time I see it. Never gets boring, never gets old.
Well, we hope you get a chance to see the space station go overhead, and you're going to learn a lot about it and some of the pieces and parts from these two gentlemen today. We know that Frank Dindal in Newton, New Jersey, said he was going to watch. Brian Ewenson is in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. He said he was going to watch today. Christopher Mix, also in Wisconsin, Hudson area there. And Daniel DeYoung, good to see your name pop up there, my friend. And Marty Chaladzan is going to watch today. We see his name a lot, and he is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So we appreciate everybody staying curious with us today. Another name that I hadn't noticed that said he was going to watch today was Andrew Wolfson. So we'll probably get a few shout-outs from your friends. We want people to watch on YouTube because we're monetized YouTube, and I think we made $2.70 last week on YouTube.
Everything helps.
That's right. When you're a nonprofit, that's the spirit there, Tracy. Everything helps indeed. Well, we're going to take care of a little bit of Stay Curious business here, guys, and then get to you right away. But we wanted to let everybody know we're not forgetting about the excitement to launch these 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. It'll be Friday morning at 3:49 a.m. Jasmine Mobili there. She is the rookie Marine commander, and seated next to her is Andreas Mogensen. His second trip to space is an ESA astronaut. He's up there for 9 days earlier. Then you got Satoshi Furukawa. He's got about 400 days in space. He's a JAXA astronaut going up. And the cosmonaut is Konstantin Borisov. So we wish them well. 2 rookies, 2 experienced people. The launch looks go, weather looks go. SpaceX has postponed the satellites they were going to launch, which I think NASA may say, you need to focus on this crewed launch instead of launching some more of your satellites there. Sorry, you all on the Space Coast that disappointed that you can't see a SpaceX launch, but we're ready for the crewed launch on there. And Marty wanted to thank John Borelli, our space geek, that was on the show yesterday. John, thank you for a great program that you all can watch on YouTube there. We know it's not a news flash, but rarely can we show a picture from the surface of the moon. And India did it this morning at 8:30 in the morning. They're supposed to get that rover off and roving around about 4 hours after landing, and I've been scouring the internet for pictures, but maybe they're catching a good night's sleep in India over there. But pretty cool what India's doing, right, guys?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we go out and look at the moon tonight, and I was getting some moonshine last night looking at the moon. It's right at the very bottom when you see it there. The moon's almost going to be first quarter, so you're not going to see the left side of it, but that's a little chart showing you all of the objects that have landed safely on the moon. 6 Apollo crewed launches. There's one on the back side of the moon. Russia did do it, though they failed earlier in the week and crashed for their first attempt in 47 years, but they put 3 rovers up there in the 70s.
It's interesting that's the first lunar pole landing. So, we want to we're looking at making our Artemis outpost in the South Pole, and that's where they landed. And we think that the South Pole has water, in some of the frozen craters there. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons we're very interested in going to the South Pole of the moon.
That water buried in craters that don't get any sunlight. You don't get up there. It's quite amazing, quite rocky, as you can see down there. So we're first time anyone's landed that far off of the equator, which is the easy way to land energy-wise. So quite an achievement for Chandra. Over 1 billion Indians in that nation are feeling prideful. Mm-hmm. And there's over 1.3 billion Chinese and 1.2 billion Indians and about 0.3 billion Americans. So let's hope they just don't run over us on the street one day. Hey, Marty, you saw the sneak preview. Happy birthday, Carlton Bailey. Good photographer friend and great partner of the museum. CB, I'm glad you're celebrating your 49th birthday again. And he's got his squirrels out there that he feeds, and he's got his Godzilla stuff going on there. And so God bless you, brother. Hope you have a great day today. I'll be in touch with you later after Stay Curious, but had to wish him we enjoy his photography on the program, and he'll be out there doing that crewed launch with bells on. Contracted photographer for years with all the space magazines out there. So Carlton, hope you're having a good birthday, buddy. Well, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you after I ask Mikey, how is the Astro 1 telescope restoration project that flew twice, mm-hmm. and of course was the pet project of your beloved Sam Durant's?
Yeah, we're real good. We're kind of in a lull right now. We're waiting to get the last 2 instruments from the Smithsonian up in Washington, D.C. But we're basically progressing ahead. Planning for at least those 2 instruments to show up and in possible integration under the cruciform. where the other two are right now. So yeah, it's kind of in a little bit of a stand down right now, but we're preparing. We take the time and prepare for the next events, and then they're also working on they're redoing actually one of the walls behind where our display is, and we're going to try to set up set it up to be like a projection screen. So they're going to do a special coating on that wall, so then we'll be actually having a video running behind the display there at Marshall. So that'd be fun.
This is going to be at the.
It's at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Ah.
It's on display right there in the atrium, so you go into the atrium, you can't miss it. It's right to the left as you walk in. It's got a quarter of the room there. So yeah, it's right now it's wrapped in plastic because the work they're doing on the wall, we don't want the payload to get dirty, so they wrapped it in plastic. But once the wall is completed and that work is done, then we'll take, of course, the plastic off and clean it, and it'll be pristine again. Yeah, even though it's not going to fly again, we treat it like it's going to fly in space. So we try to keep it very clean, very pristine.
And you can donate to that project by going to their Facebook page, right?
Yes, yeah, you can go to just type in Astro Restoration Project, and there's information in there about the project. You can donate. You can volunteer if you want, kind of thing. So lots of information there, yep.
So an important telescope that flew, a suite of telescopes that flew on the shuttle twice will be immortalized, and we're glad about that. All right, well, Tracy, we had you on about 4 months ago. We talked about STS-90. Mikey wrote a book on the space lab there. That's what that book looks like there. So y'all can order that. We love talking about the shuttles of the month of every month, 9 shuttles in the month of August. They put up 53 crew members, orbited 74 days. Oddly enough, Discovery has 5 of them, OV-103, and each of the other 4 orbiters flew 1 time in the month of August. I find that interesting. And Tracy, last time we had you on here, we talked about STS-90 in the Neuro Lab in 1998. I got to talk to Kay Heyer, who was the only person that didn't get in that wild chair on there because she said she was the only woman on board, and she was doing other stuff on there. But we enjoyed that. Tracy brought some flight hardware last time. He brought a box to show off today. And Mikey and Tracy, I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, these are basically the 2 patches, the crew patch and then the mission patch. The one of course, on the left, you see the crew, the names, and the different things that they put on the patch, represent a number of different things that the crew had come up with. And then on the right is the space station patch. Kind of the way we did space station assembly missions is they would start out with basically 1A, 1A1, 1A, 2A. This one was 7A.1, which was designated the space station, that space station mission at the time. And it was a multi-purpose logistics module that took up express racks and a number of other things that we'll talk about later. So that's kind of, we just wanted to show those patches up front to kind of show. And again, you can see a space stations going together. That's what it looked like from the patch at that time. Yep. This is the crew. Actually, it's interesting. The crew in the middle, that's the shuttle crew. The crew on the right is the crew that was on space station. The crew on the left is what flew up on the shuttle. And so basically what happens is the 4 in the middle and the 3 on the left flew up on the shuttle. They will replace the 3 that's on the right, and those 3 on the right will fly back on the shuttle with the 4 in the middle. So it's basically a transfer of three crew members, Expedition 2 to Expedition 3. On the right is Expedition 2 crew, on the left is the Expedition 3 crew.
Susan Helms become the first female to live up there.
And we wanted to kind of just show that. And then here's just basically the names. We wanted to show who got launched on STS-105, kind of their position. And then you can see the top 4 flew up, flew back. And the bottom 3 are the ones that exchanged. So Kobertson and them flew up, and then Volson and the rest of them kind of flew back on the 105 landing. That's kind of how we did a lot of the expedition changeover between crew members.
Yes, Scott Horowitz, the commander there, Rick Sturtkow now works for Virgin Galactic, just flew a suborbital mission. Dan Barry, Patrick Forrester were the crew there, and then they did the ups and downs with the other ones there. So no windows or anything in that mid deck when you go up. Okay,
this is a great picture of the mission on orbit. What you see, the silver cylinder, that's the MPLM that flew in back. We'll talk about that in a bit of it. And then the integrated it's kind of integrated carrier, that structure in the middle. This is kind of, again, to show the configuration of the payloads at that time. And we'll talk more details. We're going to focus in on one specific aspect of the MPLM. But I just wanted to show that was kind of the cargo configuration we had for 105.
Yeah, it looks great.
And then this next one is basically a close-up of that carrier, showing it was actually a replacement for the ammonia module, that big structure in the middle, and then two passive experiments and then a sample experiment that flew on this. This is a generic fixture that you could mount things on and take into space.
That whole lattice work there,
Yeah.
squares there, that's designed that you can put different
Things
on
on
there.
yeah. That was its design. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Got to have paper. Well,
Okay, and then one thing I wanted to mention too, I'm sorry, the transition. When space station was being, the concept of space station, you had external platforms, okay, with science on it. Well, us in level 4, we did external platforms with science on it. They had pressurized modules. Okay, Space Lab was a pressurized module. Space station was going to have racks that went in these modules that flew up on space station. Level 4 Space Lab had racks that flew up on modules. And so when the idea came to who would be a good fit, okay, the level 4 and the Space Lab gang was that fit, in that we could transition from Space Lab and then basically roll right into space station with very similar activities. Now again, the space station people didn't like this, but again, it was almost like for us, the space station elements were just, it's like a reflight of a payload. It's another payload that flew on the shuttle, and so we were able to have that experience from level 4 and Space Lab to transition right into the space station missions and just hit the ground running. So we were basically picked to be able to do that work. And then one of the things, the space station is a huge, of course, complex. What we're going to focus on is one very important part of that today, and that's the express racks that Tracy, again, is an expert in Space Lab racks, experiment racks. His job folded right into space station experiment racks. And that's kind of what we want to focus on today for 105.
One thing that strikes me is these all have to be built to endure that crazy launch of shake, rattle, and roll, right, Tracy?
Yeah.
And does that play a lot into your designs?
Well, you'll see that in the pictures where we process the racks with KSC, we have these big handling fixtures because the racks weigh like 1,500 pounds on the ground, and then when they're moving around in flight, they just push them with their fingers down the center aisle.
I want to go back to that previous one because that actually shows what the express. There you go.
So that's what an express rack looked like. So I think the last time Mikey was here, you talked about the MSL mission, and that was the one that flew the first prototype express rack. So it was a predecessor to the ones we're going to talk about here today, but the shape was basically the same. So the express rack concept was built on being able to capitalize on what we called mid-deck payloads. So the same kind of payloads that flew in the mid-deck of the shuttle, we used to fly those sometimes in Space Lab. Well, the idea was you could fly things up in a shuttle, either in a carrier or even in the mid-deck itself, and then you could just take them out and then go put them into a rack in the space station when the shuttle was there. So we capitalized on the inventory of experiment hardware we already had available and expertise. And by using that mid-deck standard, we were able to ease the transition between the space shuttle era and kind of the space station era. So that rack had 2 openings, kind of 4 mid-deck locker space at the top and 4 mid-deck locker spaces at the bottom. And you could have like a single mid-deck locker, or maybe your payload would be 2 mid-deck lockers, or even a quad locker. And we flew
like you're looking back here, like we're looking back here.
Well, that's actually in the module itself.
No, that's a different thing.
Yeah, so this is inside. So these racks were inside the pressurized volume. So these racks,
We'll see those here in a minute.
Yeah.
So this is a map. So you want to hand us the little box there?
Yeah.
So this drawing.
Show and tell here.
So show and tell. So so this is our friend Bob, otherwise known as Breakout Box. And these are the kind of tools we use. So when we were debugging, and these were the same exact things we used on Space Lab. So when we were debugging something, we'd have a set of cables that had matching connectors for being able to break into a flight interface. So we disconnect the flight interfaces, we put in these adapter cables, put that breakout box in the middle, and if we needed to measure the transient or hook in a network monitor, these are the tools we would use to do that. And we use the same tools in Space Lab, did that for Space Station. But when we got ready to work Space Station and did this transition, we had adapter cables built for express racks and the other station racks. as well as for the interfaces between the payloads and the rack itself, so that we had the ability to go in and put these breakout boxes in so we could debug anything that needed to be troubleshot.
So your wires go in here from the experiment.
Yep.
And all of these little connections here.
Yep.
You can tell exactly which part of that experiment.
Yep, we'd be able to
Flow
plug in
of-
a monitor or voltmeter or oscilloscope, whatever we needed to plug into these breakout boxes.
I asked why the Jack Legend.
So
That
normally
it sounds like a fictional
it was just
spy name.
sounds like a sci-fi movie maybe. No, it was because we had plugs and jacks, and it
Plugs
just
and
depended which
jacks,
side of the interface you plugged into.
And I'm looking at the detail here. I love the detail. I'm looking at the calibration maintenance status.
Yeah,
this is
So that one got excess, so it hasn't been maintained.
November 19th, 09.
Yeah, it hasn't been maintained in a while because it's been
Yeah.
excess.
It was good till November 2010. But fuse interruption box. So just one of the tools in Tracy's toolbox to make sure that everything, all those electrons are flowing the way they're supposed to, right?
Yep.
Cool. We love that bringing in there.
So this is one. Do we have a picture of this?
We have that later.
Yeah, we have-
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we
we
got
have-
that later.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to another schematic there.
So that's just kind of a cartoon block diagram of the electronics that was in an express rack. It had a computer, and then it had a power box and interfaces to the payload. So that's just kind of and this came out of a book that we made. So we collect knowledge. So we on this mission we flew express rack 4 and 5.
4 and 5, yeah.
Earlier missions we had flown express rack 1 and 2. I think 4 and 5 flew next. I don't know. I think 3 got skipped temporarily. But we collected all this knowledge. So we wrote this book, and we would power up these racks. We tested the racks to make sure the rack was going to work, but then we were testing the payloads that were going to launch inside them. And sometimes we would, we sent up Express Rack 1 and 2, but then on other missions in between, we were going to send up more payloads. So we'd kind of pull Express Rack 4 or 5 aside and put those new payloads in it and test it. We built up all this knowledge, and we powered these racks up hundreds of times. So we wrote a book for ourselves to capture our knowledge, and we kind of called it Express Rack for Dummies. Where we passed the knowledge around our team and had all these tools and lessons learned and just troubleshooting advice and records of previous problems we'd seen and how we get past them. And we just kind of collected that knowledge over the years, and we kind of passed that along in our team. And this is just one of the things that, hey, if I'm a new Express Rack engineer, I would go to this book and it would have kind of this basic information to help me get up to speed.
We might run across one of those books at our auction sometime here. How much of that has translated in 20 years to what you're doing today, Tracy?
Well, we use the same principles, but these racks are still running on station now.
Good.
Matter of fact, I think last year Express Rack 1 and 2 crossed the 20-year mark. They've been
Excellent. We're going to
running
see
for
pictures of
20
those
years.
coming up here. All right.
Yep.
Good. All right.
So this I think is a picture of. Matter of fact, I think this might be Express Rack 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think it's
But again, you mentioned the difference between these racks on the ground and in flight. Well, there's a big handling structure because that's what we needed to handle it on the ground, and we would roll it up to this test stand we had, and that test stand, if you can kind of see in the bottom left there's all these connectors. And those connectors replicated the interfaces that we would have inside the U.S. lab, inside the Japanese module, and inside the Columbus module, in locations that had identical interfaces. And it was power, data, high rate, fiber optic high rate data, some fluids interfaces. And, we mimicked the interfaces of the US lab for these new experiments. We'd configure their test stand to replicate a certain location in the US lab. We'd run our tests, roll that rack away, roll up another one, reconfigure it for another location, and run the next test. And I brought up an example of one of those connectors. So those connectors, at the bottom of the rack, they would be called utility interface panels. So when the racks came to get installed, they would kind of mechanically push the rack into place, rotate it into location, and then it would come in and connect all these kind of umbilical cables to connect the rack into the U.S. lab. So this cable. So let me hold there for a second. So this happens to be the power connector. And these connectors in the space station era, they had an improvement over what we had in the Space Lab era in some respects, that the crew wanted to be able to have some positive feedback when they were connecting connectors, so that you knew they were connecting the right way. Because sometimes if you connected a threaded connector, you might have it misalign and it would get, kind of stuck in place. Well, these make a kind of a ratcheting noise. And when you mix that ratcheting noise, you're connecting it the right way. One thing we found, because we were rolling these racks up, disconnecting them, then disconnecting them, rolling them away, rolling them back again, we found that this ratcheting noise was actually creating little metal shavings, which is a problem, but it's a real problem in microgravity, because you
Yes.
definitely don't want metal shavings floating around, getting in the electronics, or having the crew breathe it in. So when we found this, we ended up actually having the teams that were doing all these activities on orbit had to modify the procedures so that when they connected or disconnected the racks, they had to have a vacuum nearby to collect any debris that might come out. So it's kind of one of the lessons learned from ground operations that had influenced the things they did in flight.
Interesting. That's why you keep all that paperwork. Everybody
Exactly.
check that out there. Next up here, another picture of the.
But just another image of a rack under test. So again, the rack had a certain complements of payloads in it. They would fly up with a certain set of payloads. They might not fly up full because maybe we didn't have the mass to get them up full on that mission. And then we would fly up other payloads, either in a generic rack that had no electronics just for transportation, or you'd fly them up in the middeck. So what would happen, for example, maybe they flew up an experiments in a commercial refrigerator incubator module that had to be maintained at a certain temperature. It would fly up in the shuttle, powered. It would, once they got to station, they would temporarily turn it off and then translate it back, put it in the express rack, connect it up, and turn it back on to minimize the time that the experiment was without power, to keep those samples at the right temperature, and then they were ready to go once they were installed in space station.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just an example of the many, many paperwork items we did. So there was one particular example, I think, on Express Rack 4, and we found that one of the experiments, and it was actually managed by a friend of ours, Tim Owen, who had worked with us in the Space Lab era. He was managing this payload. I think it was called Dynamically Controlled Protein Crystal Growth, DCPCG. And we found that there was just a data dropout at some random time, and we kind of found that it was repeatable, and we were able to use the payload and adjust the different data rates and file sizes, and we were able to reproduce the problem. So then we said, well, we don't really know what's causing it. And if we switched it to another network inside the rack, we didn't have the same problem. So then well, is it just the payload or is it something else? So then we removed the payload and put in a data generator and reproduced the same problem, so that we knew it wasn't specific to just that experiment. And then we tried to reproduce the problem on an avionics test bed and on a ground version of an express rack. Couldn't do it. And the reason, one of the lessons we've learned from Space Lab and all the experiment work we've done over the years is flight systems are unique. And the way the rack was built and the way the avionics test bed was built was a little bit different. They took some maybe cost savings shortcuts where we didn't have an exactly flight-like box. Well, the data loading, the processor utilization was a little bit different. So the problem only happened on a flight rack. And to prove that, we took the same payloads and we put them in Express Rack 5, ran the same test and reproduced it and said, hey, it's definitely a problem that's unique to the flight hardware configuration. And we were able to figure out a way to work around the problem, and they were able to adjust the ops they wanted to do. But it showed the value of, testing on flight hardware is unique. And, you want to, if you're going to rely on an avionics test bed or a ground rack, you want to make sure that it behaves the same as a flight rack. And if it doesn't, you want to understand why.
Well, to fly as an astronaut and this experiments you've trained for and so forth, your preparation work, what confidence they must have that they flip the switches, everything's going to be perfect.
Well, we certainly hope so. And we're trying to apply those same lessons today. I tell
what I'm you keep referring, Tracy, to Space Lab and Space Hab too, but those were the that's where you learned all to do this in the payload bay, and then translated it to the International Space Station. I think that's so cool. Do we go forward here? There we go. Oh, another one. Yeah, we had another.
Yeah, there's more paperwork. That's just a sample of the level of signatures we have to get to be able to do anything.
There you go.
Yeah.
Kind of like a good troubleshooting
Yeah, the
plan.
troubleshooting plan. It was just one page of a, I don't know, 100-page problem report. Just say, here's some of the signatures we needed to get our approval to keep doing work. And then this was just a close up. So this is the, I think in that previous picture we showed the utility interface panel where the kind of mimic the interfaces in the U.S. lab. Well, this is the side. So this is the other end of that. That's the bottom of the rack, and the umbilicals kind of connect between that panel on the rack and then the U.S. lab. So they'd roll it into place, and the astronauts would come in and make all the connections to connect the experiment to the.
So that was kind of how it was launched.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
launched in this configuration. Yeah.
It says launch like that.
It was launched like that.
And
Yeah,
all right.
it's just another view of it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now what this is, we wanted to. Okay, that's the rack, the express rack, and all the work that Tracy and his gang did to get this thing ready for launch. Well, how do we get it from where they're working on it to space? And this is what was used, a multi-purpose logistics module. Again, 3 of these built by the Italians, Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello. And no, that wasn't the turtles. It was famous Italian
Right.
scientists,
I
artists,
said
and
Columbus.
sculptors.
Wasn't there a Columbus one too?
No, it was just the 3.
Okay,
Just the 3.
Donatello.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Donatello actually didn't fly. Just Leonardo flew the most, and Raphael were the 2 that flew. I don't even know Donatello. But this
Why?
is it was. Go ahead.
That one, Donatello, was designed to be active in the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And after the Columbia accident, we changed the way some of our science priorities and decided we didn't need that capability, that we could get the things we wanted to get up to station refrigerated in the middeck and didn't need the capacity of a whole rack,
Donatello
a whole
had refrigeration. And
you
stuff
could put
on it.
a refrigerator in it, a whole rack refrigerator in Donatello, and keep it active in the shuttle during accident. He just decided it wasn't necessary, so it didn't fly.
So this is basically a cutout of that module, that MPLM, and it's showing the racks on how they would be installed. Now, unlike Space Lab, where you can do a whole train install them as one assembly, you didn't have that opportunity here, and it was an enclosed module. How do you get these huge racks inside this module? Okay, that was the trick, because you got the different quadrants and all that. You basically filled the whole inside with these racks. You can see on the right there, like one of the experiment racks kind of thing. Okay, so how did we get this thing installed? Okay, so the next set of graphics.
Go.
Okay, well actually this is what the MPLM looks like inside. This is kind of an empty one. You can see 3 of the 4 quadrants have the racks there, and the 4th quadrant is empty. Okay, how do you populate this? How do you get the rest of the racks in here, into this pressurized module? You can't do it from overhead, and so it was developed. It's called a rack insertion device, RID. And I'm going to say RID from now on, so I don't have to keep saying rack. But basically, it's just it was a rack insertion device. It was this large, huge device with an extending arm that they would then you basically grab the rack. In fact, it's just basically a picture of the RID showing that it could extend, it could rotate, and the different movements of the arm and the end effector to kind of get these racks lined up to get them inside. The next graphics basically show how that worked. Okay, here's the step 1 is basically you roll the rack up to the RID. The RID is kind of facing us with the arm. Okay, step 2 is you attach the rack to the RID. Okay, step 3 is you rotate the RID 90 degrees, and you can see kind of rotated there in the very center between the 2 elements is the rack, and the MPLM's off to the left there. Okay, so that's step 3. Step 4 is you extend that arm of the RID in the large opening of the MPLM, okay, to get it inside. Okay, now once you're inside, which is the next 2, now it becomes real fun in that you got to line these things up. And so this is basically showing the rack kind of being lined in its position as step 5 and rotated on that device into its final location for flight inside the RID. Okay, and you had to do that basically for all the racks. Now the RID itself was limited in its function. Well, you had 4 quadrants there. Okay, well, how do you get an upper and lower quadrant? You can maybe get in the sides, but how do you get an upper and lower? Basically, the whole MPM was on this large rotating device. So we put in these racks in one orientation. We have to rotate the whole MPLM to then do the rest of the racks.
So you'd rotate the whole thing
Yep.
around there.
Around there to be able to get those other racks into those quadrants. Okay, and
So
then
the rid could install on either side, and then
Right.
you just rotate to do the top and bottom.
top and bottom. Okay, I just wanted to, just real quick, I mean, space station is huge, and we just wanted to touch on this. This is the inside of the space station processing facility, looking towards the east from the west end. And you can kind of see off in the center there on the right, under the American flag, you can see the rid, picture of the rid, that's that large white, looks like a house.
Yeah.
And then the two pressurized logistics modules, MPLMs on either side. That way we can basically stuff two MPLMs at one time with one rid. And so we position them there so you can basically fill two MPLMs. And this is basically all the other work that was going on in space station. One thing you mentioned earlier, Mark, was those windows off to the right. That's where the tour buses used to come in. So tour buses used to come in and watch us working on space station. Again, this is the space station processing facility. It's kind of next to the operations and checkout building there in the south part of Kennedy. And so we'd wave to the tourists and that as they'd watch us. And it was just fun to be able to, people could come in and see, this is stuff that's going to space station. These are people working hard, it's going to go fly in space. And so it was really neat for the people visiting the Space Center to be able to see that work going on real time.
And we felt like the zoo animals, and they're performing for them.
Well, I was one of those people looking at you. I'll never forget that trip and looking through the windows at Raphael down there. They had them labeled with the Italian flags and all that. And yep, quite a that was a part of the regular bus tour around there during the day. Anybody put up a sign, "Marry me" or anything like that?
No, we would wave a lot of times.
That's
to
what I
them.
remember. I just know that they were laughing at us wearing our bunny suits, our clean room garments in there.
Yeah, because we did. It was again like Space Lab. When you got near the flight hardware, we would be all suited up, and you'll see that in some of the pictures coming up.
And this is still the very same place now where the Artemis is coming together. SSPF, they have the elements of, I think, the Canadian service modules.
The upper
now,
stage, is in there.
in there.
Yeah,
So,
the Artemis itself is in the, or Orion is in the ONC. And this is just a close-up of that area, showing the rid in the middle, and then the two MPLMs on each side. I wanted to just kind of get kind of more of a close-up view of that. And you kind of see in the middle there, it's a black device. That's the boom extension.
One of the interesting things about the RID is, early in the program, when the first racks started going up, they started finding debris. Do you remember this? So they found debris. So one of the challenges of processing is when you manufacture this rack, there's going to be debris in it. Well, one of the things we started using a RID for, at least for the first year, we take the racks and just rotate them to try to make sure we
dump everything out
dumped
of
all
it
the debris out.
See if
try to
anything
minimize-
rattled,
when you got them there.
Yeah, and if you could see again, you can kind of see, okay, this is basically one of the racks. And again, these are pictures of multiple MPLM missions. It's not all the 105, but I just wanted to get pictures of the different kind of procedures that we used. That was a rack that was getting connected. Now it's on the end effector. We call the end effector arm being lifted off the ground. And again, you can see as you see kind of in the back there, you got the two big rings over the MPLM, and that's just basically a huge gear. That black outer rim is actually, it's not painted. That's actually a huge gear. And there was a large motor that ran that gear, and that's how we rotated the MPLM to get it in the orientation.
Like a
very slowly.
lapidary rock rolling thing or something like that.
Very slowly.
It was amazing to watch. It was. And so here it is now. We're rotating the RID around. Again, you can see the rack kind of in the middle, and the MPLM, and the opening area where the gentleman or woman is basically in the blue suit, ready to accept that rack. Okay? And then the next picture is basically that rack basically positioned right at the opening, ready to be extended, that boom arm extend out to get that rack inside the flight MPLM.
Question, guys. These racks are designed for space, so they're fragile in Earth's gravity.
They're fragile and they can't support themselves. They have to be supported.
They can't. That's what's kind of. That's why you got these white devices, the
handling fixtures, all kinds of things, and that then we see them installing them in orbit, and they're just pushing it down the aisle.
Marty, you got a question?
Yeah, we have a question from Carlton Bailey. He says, I think to remember going in there for a photo shoot, meaning the space station processing building, and noticed something in an upper office window. Did Gumby live there at one time?
Yeah, well, I think it was a leftover from Space Lab. I don't know if you want to tell the story, but Gumby.
Gumby was there before me.
Okay, basically it was kind of like not an internal joke, but it was kind of our little way of keeping things lighthearted. was to have Gumby up there and basically waving to people that came in to visit the. It was kind of like a little mascot, I could think. And
Gumby.
And it was up in one of the control room windows. We had it in the operations and checkout building for Space Lab, and it just kind of transitioned in the station. It was kind of like
but
a
it was
mascot.
part of the idea. We have
Yeah.
to stay flexible.
Yeah.
You know, whatever problems come our way, we got to be flexible and overcome it. But you know, that was part of the what it meant to us.
That was kind of why Gumby was there. Yep.
Well, we've got Kurt and Spock over there, my Christmas tree ornaments, to
I hope that answered his question.
bring us good luck in there. Go right, CB. You hope you're having a good birthday today. Let's get back
Excuse
to our, yeah, so we've always got to keep in mind that most everything that you guys deal with is not it's made to be in space, not on Earth. So it's super lightweight compared to what we need here.
Yeah, these racks are actually about rack 4 and 5 are about 1,200 pounds.
1,200.
So you're seeing about 1,200 pounds. Okay, this next picture, this is the inside. You can see the opening there to the far left. This is inside the MPLM now. You can see them with the lid extended and the rack kind of getting repositioned for its final location into the MPLM, and a different, text there ready to kind of, guide it in place and eventually connect it up for flight.
What?
Excuse me, darn it. This is kind of like an integrated MPLM.
So that one's nearly full. So, you can see some hardware getting strapped to the front of the rack, and that's probably some of the loose stowage that they would put in. So again, that one's been populated on both sides, both sides, and then the top and bottom. And then, are you going to talk about the aft area and the aft access closure?
Go ahead, yeah.
So there's a large, this opening that we're seeing here, it's actually a large opening that's only for ground access. The actual common berthing mechanism where it would dock to the stations at the other end behind the technician that's in the clean room covering here. So it was only for ground access. And then once we got that populated, we put that aft and the closure on it
Yeah,
and
we got
seal it up for
pictures of
flight.
that after
Yeah,
this one here.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
And there's Leonardo getting lifted. It's done. It's going to the payload
Mike's
canister.
getting choked up about this.
Yeah.
I know what's going on.
Water there.
All this fun stuff coming back.
So this is lifting it up into the canister to get ready to transport it out to the for stationary we were taking these out and rotating the canister and then installing these at the pad.
Yeah, for Space Lab, we went in at the OPF. For station, we went at the launch pad. Yeah.
And then, a big difference between even though they look similar, again it's a pressurized module canister. Space Lab was a lot different in that it was active in the orbiter. There was all these interfaces. Well, when these went up, the space shuttle was much more like a truck. It was usually off. And if there was anything connected, it was power for heaters to keep something from freezing. So from a payload processing perspective, it wasn't that interesting for the shuttle. Our work was focused on making sure the different pieces of space station worked when they got up into space and were turned on. It was a different challenge than what we were doing in the Space Lab era, trying to make sure everything was going to work with the shuttle. In this case, with the shuttle, almost all these pieces of space station were off, and their work didn't start till they got into space.
Yep. So this is kind of the canister getting rotated from horizontal to vertical. Canister rotation facility. A large transportation device, our K-Mag, gets transported around.
Let's talk about our green screen here behind us, because we're at
Okay.
that stage. That's what you're talking about now, vertical out the pad.
Yep, the canister then will be rotated to vertical and then sent out to the pad. You'll see the canister kind of in the middle left there, the large rectangular. That would be then lifted up into the payload changeout room, which is part of that rotating service structure, that big gray structure. Of course, the elements are inside there. And once that was all rotated in place, that whole mechanism would rotate around the shuttle. And then, of course, the element would be transferred from the room. They went from the canister into the room, from the room into the shuttle. And this is a picture of this is Leonardo's thing. This is his last flight. Inside the shuttle. This is what it looks like inside the shuttle. You see the technician off to the left or the right there in the blue suit. And basically the shuttle pointing up in vertical, ready to go into space. That's kind of what it looked like just before we closed the doors for flight.
So Tracy, you load it horizontal, but it's going to lift off vertical. And you got to be thinking about that, of course.
Well, it didn't matter because it was off to me. So it was pretty simple. Once we finished the work in the SSPF and loaded it in the MPLM, there wasn't that much to do except wait for it to turn on orbit. But similar to we talked in Space Lab that some of the times we would go up to the Huntsville and help the folks at the Haas. Well, and I did that for I think 5 different Space Lab missions. Well, when Express Rack 1 and 2 were powered on for the first time, they asked me again to go up there and sit next to the operators and make sure they didn't run into any problems that we hadn't seen before. But then, after Express Rack 1 and 2 ran and they had all that experience, they didn't need that, that help from us anymore, because they had, by the time Express Rack 4 and 5 got up there, they had hundreds and hundreds of hours of experience.
Express Rack.
And Express, we should say that's an acronym.
That's an
I think
acronym.
it's even on there. Expedite the processing of experiments to space station.
Expedite the processing of experiments to space station. I didn't know that was an acronym. I thought express to space, in there.
That's important.
I hope you're enjoying this Stay Curious with Tracy, Gill, and Mikey Haddad. Mikey comes on once a month, or has someone appear for you all once a month to talk about payloads. I'm always struck with how you're making it so much easier for the astronauts by you've gone through all the problems on the ground and the confidence they must have in your team. Do they come down and thank you regularly about this, or?
Yeah.
We would work with them occasionally. They would come down for certain tests, but the people that we work with probably the most closely were either like an experiment provider or the mission ops team. And when we find these problems on the ground and they reflect those changes and those findings in the mission ops procedures, which is really where the money hits hits home, because that's where it has to be right. And all that ground testing goes into making sure those flight procedures work. And we're trying to do these same things for Artemis. Same thing. We're going to make sure that we do all the right things on the ground to make sure things work in space. And the lessons that we learned from station, especially with some of the tests we did a set of tests early in the station program called MEIT, multi-element integrated test, where we took the initial elements that were flying on station that were launching separately and tested them together on the ground. We couldn't physically connect them, but we would hook in breakout boxes and adapter cables and jumper cables and make it seem like they were connected in flight. We're trying to take all those lessons learned from those kinds of tests and apply them here to Artemis, where things are not going to just meet for the first time in space. They're going to meet for the first time in the vicinity of the moon. It's where it's much harder to get to and the risk is a little bit higher. So we're trying to apply all these lessons to that.
Good
Well,
stuff.
we hope they listen to those lessons for sure. Well, here's what the space station busted apart looks like, and
Yeah, it's just going again to show how complex station is. For STS-105, we actually dock down at the node, which is kind of in the lower right there. There's two things. There's docking and berthing. Docking is like when the shuttle goes up and connects to the space station, okay, and the people go in and out. Berthing is like what we do with the MPLM, which I think is on the next. I think it's on the next figure there. Okay, what that is, berthing is the MPLM is in the cargo payload bay of the shuttle. We grab the arm, use the robotic Canadian arm, remove it from the shuttle payload bay and connect it to station. That's called berthing. That's not docking. Berthing is you externally help something connect to the space station. So when you hear docking, it's usually direct. Berthing is assistance from either the station arm or the shuttle arm. And this is a graphic actually showing what happened on 105, STS-105. The MPLM was pulled out by the shuttle arm and connected to the Node 1 nadir port. There's actually 6 ports on there. And that's how basically it's connected, like Tracy had mentioned before, these large, what's called a common berthing mechanism. That's generically how all these pressurized elements would be connected. It's a universal device that all the elements were used.
the
So that's basically
orbiter
how they.
Discovery was that close to another module
Yeah.
right
yeah.
above there. That's very interesting.
Well, the pressurized mating adapter, which is the black device really down at the bottom that made it into, is actually cut at an angle to keep from hitting the shuttle. The part of it, you can see the modules a lot wider and would hit the shuttle, and so the pressurized mating adapter basically was like a cone that allowed that clearance to be able to get the shuttle right up as close as we can for docking purposes. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Okay, now once you got it up on space, like Tracy said, on the ground we have this huge RID device, 1,200 pounds, and all this. In space, they just grab it and float it away. And so this is kind of a picture of the crew with the rack kind of just floating at 1,200 pounds. Again, it's 1,200 pounds of mass, but it's zero gravity. And so they would just take these racks out of the MPLM and float them into their where they would be going, for flight, which is, I think, the next couple pictures.
So these put in a lot of the scientific racks that are now on the space station. Was up there.
Yeah, and the idea behind the MPLM was basically a big logistics carry. It was the only piece that really came back. It would go up full of new stuff. They do the exchange. The new stuff would go in station. The old stuff would come out of station, put in the MPLM, and then brought back to Earth. And that was kind of the way we got things up and down on space station. And so again, you could see it just large enough to fit through the opening, like Tracy was mentioning,
Yeah.
to the other areas of space station wherever they were final resting
And
places.
also, when we launched a lot of these elements, they couldn't be launched fully populated because of the mass. I think for the U.S. lab, I think we might have launched like 13 out of 24 rack positions filled, and 11 were open. So we had to fly up racks to fill up our volume and get the full utilization of station.
Yep. And so this is again showing one of the crew members kind of in there as the racks kind of going in or coming out, a very tight fit. But this is basically how and then they would float it into place and connect it up. And like Tracy mentioned, then you do all the mechanical connection to hold it in place, and then all those electrical connections and GN2 lines and whatever to be able to start integrating it with the station ops. So it's just another picture, and I think the one right after is just another photograph of what
This is a very infant space station, by the way, too. It looks nothing like
Oh yes,
in 2001. It was just a few.
it was just a few elements that were up there
Yeah.
at the time. And again, this is just showing another crew member with the rack kind of in a different position. You can see him kind of one-handed, and another crew member kind of helping that.
Yeah,
into
you can
place.
see definitely, racks may go in this room here to fill it in more.
That was the idea, was to show kind of all the other things that were there. And this is one of the racks on orbit.
Yeah, that's an on-orbit picture of a fully populated express rack with all the cables, going between the payload and the rack control panels there. And it's each of the locations in the rack you could connect power and data, and then there was like medium temperature and low temperature lines for coolant, and then it had some other services like vacuum and gas GN2, I think, as well.
Very interesting. I'm just fascinated at how all this has got up there. You wonder, if you hadn't thought it through, how did all these experiments get in the space station? They couldn't send them up.
That
With the
image has a
modules.
nice view of all the umbilical connections we were talking at the bottom of the rack there as well.
Amazing.
Great. And we're looking at stuff that's been up there over 20 years that you guys
Yeah.
worked on there. We're talking, we've had a great program here today. Got one other little comment to bring up here in a minute. Wanted to say hi to Doug Forrest is watching in Los Angeles, and Ronald Law is up in Dundee, Scotland. Ophelia Sautro, she's in Normandy, France. So Gary Rivera, thank you for watching. We've got Americans, Carlton and Tom Usiak and Dave Stangy's watching. Space Monkey, he's going to go out and buy a shirt off you, Marty, I think, at the launch. R. Galki, that's a new name for me. Kenny Rivera, Matteo Marangani.
Bob Galke is one of our level 4 buddies.
Bob Galki, all right,
Yeah.
level 4.
Hey Bob, how
guy.
you doing?
Jerry Rivera too.
Yeah, Jerry.
All
Glad
right.
you guys are watching.
And Bill Whiting's watching.
Glad everybody's watching. Thank
one
you
of
to
our-
everybody. It's
And
watching,
well,
yeah.
the regulars there know the good shows are when someone else is talking besides me. So, but one little kind of anecdote here, very interesting story that we talked about of how things, you need a lot of lessons learned, and sometimes they don't. They come into you in innocent and different ways, and so that sets you up there, Mikey, here after we answer this question.
Oh, we got a question from Dave Stangy. Did anything ever come loose inside the container when it returned from space on the shuttle?
I don't think of anything.
Anything come loose and rattle, shake, and roll on the launches, and they're going like, "Oh, where's my connector?"
I can think of just in the Space Lab era, I know was the experiment engineer on the glove box, one of the glove boxes, and one of our connector caps went missing, and it ended up finding its way loose during descent, and I think it made a little dent in the aft end cone, and we found it in kind of one of the filters basically. and we would find things like M&Ms in the filters and stuff, but typically everything was really buttoned down well for both ascent and descent. The only reason that connector cap was loose is because the crew couldn't find it, and it probably floated away, and then it reappeared during descent because of gravity.
But really, the answer is no to Dave Stange. Nothing that
No,
created
nothing,
anomalies or
nothing's-
problems with the
Nah.
and
Nothing
that in
came loose,
itself is a
really.
testimony, Dave, to the meticulous way that you guys have to conduct your business. Mikey's got a story here that involves this piece of structure. No, not that piece of structure. How about that piece of structure?
Okay, yeah, this is on Leonardo's first mission at STS-102, and MPLM comes back, and this is one of the alignment guides that was on the flight hardware. If you notice, there's somebody took and wrote on the flight hardware with a magic marker.
That's a no-no, right?
And that's a no-no. I mean, we have a flight magic marker that we use, but this didn't go up this way. It came back with this writing on it. And it's like, whoa, what the heck? Who kind of what's the story here?
Kilroy was here.
Well, come to find out, it was after some research. It was actually Bill Shepard, who was basically one of the first to be on station, American astronaut. He wrote on it, and we asked him kind of what was the story. Why would you write on this? And he said, if you look at what it says inspect these inserts. And what happened is on orbit, this alignment got everything was taken.
Inspect these inserts.
Yeah, check these inserts. I think it says check, whatever it is.
check.
Check the inserts. And so what happens? They removed this guide on orbit. Well, when they put it back on, they had some of the inserts behind that had got messed up. Well, of course, the guide's on, so we would have never known those inserts were messed up because it was hidden behind the guide. And so Shepard said, I guess he tried to relay it through Houston, whatever. Anyways, we didn't even know about it. And he said,
There's the astronaut.
he said
you
later
found
on,
out
yeah,
in
he
Bill
said later
Shepard.
on, he says, I wrote on the flight hardware because I knew the KSC guys would see this and fix it. So that's why he actually said, I'm going to write on the item and tell them, hey, there's a problem here, fix it. Boom, real easy, something. He was down there, a straightforward guy. And over the years, been interacting with Bill, and I've been telling the story. The story comes up every once in a while. And I keep telling. I send a message to Bill. And anyways, come the 10th anniversary of the Atlantis exhibit at the KSC Visitor Center,
A month ago.
he was one of the astronauts that showed up. And so I got to go I want to meet Bill, firsthand and shake his hand and tell him this, talk about the story. And so we did. When he came off the stage, everybody's pushing everybody back. And hey, Bill, Mike Haddad. Oh, hey, how you doing? I said, hey, I got the picture that you writing on the MPLM. He goes, oh, I remember that. He goes, I need a picture with you. So he calls me over, and this is the picture we took at the Atlantis exhibit. This is him today, Bill Shepard. And again, if he hadn't done that, it could have been a real problem because it would have been a hidden failure that we didn't even know about. And so as we're taking this picture, he kind of leans over. He goes, Mike, I hope I didn't get you guys in trouble by doing this. And I says, Bill, you saved our neck. You writing on the flight hardware saved our neck because we knew there was a problem back there. And because you had the, confidence in us knowing that we would see that and fix it. I just wanted to shake your hand. He goes, I want to shake your hand too. And it was just really nice to meet him. And so that was just a little offshoot on one of the earlier MPLM missions of Leonardo. So I want to tell that story.
That's a great story
Yeah.
there. Marty and I were both at that event. That was a tremendous event, and Bill Shepard really was one of the highlights there, wasn't he, Marty? He had a lot of good stories to tell there. So, well, you guys, another great job here on Stay Curious, Mikey's book, Space Lab, The Payload, and The People. And we're so proud to meet these people here and that they want to share their stories on Stay Curious in the American Space Museum. We've loved having you guys on there. Of course, you're always welcome. And I'll send you the shuttles of the month of September, and we'll see if we can drum up there. But
Okay.
Tracy, always great to have you on there. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and Mikey, of course, you
Always
guys.
good. Always fun
Anything
being
else
here,
you want
Mark.
to add to the program today? That I mean, these are sort of the unsung heroes of how we got the science up there, because things have to be organized and in a rack or a desk or whatever. And that's what you guys did quite clearly. So
Yeah, no, it's a great thrill to work on the express racks and to see the science still being done today. Like I said, Express Rack 1 and 2 have been running over 20 years. And they flew 8 express racks, and then they built 3 more kind of derivatives just in the last few years and flew them as well. So very, very successful program.
where are Leonardo and Raphael? Did they bring him back, or they stick him up with the
Good
trash
question.
and
Good
burn him?
question. Leonardo's actually on station. It was the final logistics module that was sent up there, and it's permanently attached to station. Raphael was that was given to. I got it right here. It was Raphael was sent to. Let's see, who was it?
It's in a museum somewhere.
Yeah, Raphael was. It was
Italian museum, I would guess.
Yeah, flying. Let's see what it says. It was actually was transferred to Axiom Space.
Axiom.
It's to be repurposed as flown as an Axiom orbital segment.
Oh, really?
That's
That'd
Leonardo.
be exciting. We've been talking about Axiom and the 4 segments they want to put up, and then their power plant, and then go drift away, and you guys will be taking your retirement vacations up there. Your second retirement vacations there.
And the Donatello, I guess, is the prototype Lockheed Martin is using for space habitat, right?
We still have it. We've retired it from that. We're still trying to figure out what happens to it at this point.
You don't want to get rid of hardware that's made to go to space, though, right? That's just not laying around on shelves around here.
It's not, but you have to have the right application for it. So, it was designed for going to station, and it's got those accommodations, and it's got the right shielding for low Earth orbit. And so it's good for low Earth orbit. It may not be good for other destinations.
Okay. Well, always fascinating to talk to these two. Marty, you got anything else to add to today's program?
Yep, we're good.
Good. Well, good job, Marty, and great job, guys. And we're looking at Thursday tomorrow, and probably talk some more about that space flight going to launch 4 humans off the planet Earth to the International Space Station. We've got 10 humans orbiting the Earth. Don't forget the 3 Chinese on their space station. So 10 and 4 will make 14, Marty. But we blasted, I think there were 17 in orbit at one time when Crew Dragon 5 came back. So Crew 7 is going to join Crew 6 sometime Saturday morning. We hope they get off Friday morning in good shape. So fellas, thank you a lot for helping us stay curious today as I hold up this
Breakout box.
breakout box. So we hope to see you again in our museum or on Stay Curious to bridge the space between us.